I'm feeling it. I am feeling it.
So, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who scored only 4 Rouges all last season, Jack.
The Stampeders are over the hump and back on top. 2018 Grey Cup champions.
Yeah, man, I eat chalk for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Here's a 50 to the 40, down near the 20. He's going to score! Touchdown! A chance to win! Will they get it? Yes, they will! Unbelievable! Oh, my goodness!
Whew! Muy caliente.
Hola, amigos. Bienvenidos al podcast Rojo, Blanco y El Rouge. That's very on theme for today's podcast, guys. This is our inaugural pod for the Red, White, and Rouge podcast for all you uncultured swine who didn't understand that. Yeah, Rob and I are going to do it under a different name this year, and it's perfect because we got CFL 2.0 underway. So, Rob, why don't you start us off by telling us what exactly is CFL 2.0?
All right, so yeah. Once again, I'm Rob, and I believe you've listened to me before, but if not, welcome. And yeah, so despite the fact that the CFL really dies for 8 months of the year most of the time, this year the CFL was making news over and over and over again due to the brainchild of the one great commissioner, Randy Ambrosie, with his concept of CFL 2.0. Which reminds me a lot of the Office episode with with Dunder Mifflin 2.0. But that's beside the point. So the first big change was the Halifax expansion, which is going to be happening not this season, but the following season. I'm actually a big fan of this because it'll even out the number of teams in each conference. There'll be 5 in the East, 5 in the West, instead of the mismatch that we have right now. But what was even more important than that was the agreement with the Mexican Football League, the Liga, the Liga de Fútbol Americano Profesional, which led to an actual draft of Mexican players into the CFL. Each team getting a few players. A bunch of them have already been cut, but a few of them seem to be making teams and actually could be useful. But Randy didn't finish there. He then went on the greatest Euro trip anyone has ever had in their time off. And he signed agreements with the German Football League, French Football League, Austrian Football League, as well as the football leagues in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, and I believe Italy. So he is more powerful than Napoleon and has quite an empire in North America. Now all these players can be drafted into the CFL from Europe, from Mexico. Obviously, I don't think a ton of players will be actually coming, but it's really a long-term play. You might be asking why, and the reason is because before this podcast, the AFL and XFL were supposed to be coming back and coming in strong. However, the AFL has obviously already died. The Alliance of American Football has already died.
It's the
and
AAF.
AAF. Oh, yeah. Right. You're absolutely right. And the XFL is still coming. This created an issue of Randy Hope being concerned that we wouldn't be able to get enough elite talent in the CFL. However, that doesn't really make sense because going to Europe to find elite football talent doesn't really make any sense. However, that's the thinking. As well, he's hoping to increase league revenues off broadcasting in Europe and Mexico. Potentially, if a player comes into the CFL from Mexico or Europe, I guess that people might get invested in the sport. Randy has said many times in interviews that he wants to create a global league and has reached out to football leagues in other countries as well, like Japan and Fiji and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how far this goes. I don't know if the idea is brilliant, and overall, even if it is a brilliant idea, it is still a hilarious idea, and it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. On top of that, there's also a brand new CBA in the CFL, which is a lot less interesting. But I'll just kind of gloss over it really quick. There's more revenue sharing for the players. So the CFL does it's not a very profitable league at the ticket counter, but it does exceptionally well on television. And the revenue from advertisements and stuff on TSN is large. They get a lot from these deals, and now players will be able to glean a little bit more of that money from broadcasting revenue. And as well, a big thing, which I was surprised wasn't a thing before, was now players who come to play in the CFL from the US, if they want to stay, they can easily get jobs in the off season. Obviously, the CFL job is their main job, but for the 8 months they're not playing, they're able to get jobs in Canada, something that wasn't allowed before that really should have been.
Yeah, you're right. I was very surprised by that as well. So what we got planned for you guys today is for the first half of not the first half. This is part 1 of 2. We're going to be previewing basically the Western Conference, just giving you guys some cliff notes on each team. What's different, because there was a lot of changes around the league during the off season, and then we will give our conference predictions, followed by Grey Cup prediction. Because spoiler alert, our Grey Cup winners are both from the West. In the next show, we will be previewing the much less exciting East, and then after that will be the first actual DFS show of the season for all you degenerates who are here to try and make some money over on DraftKings. So
we're just here for the love of the sport, so we
Well,
kind of look down on all of you.
Well, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Anyway, okay, so biggest, I would say the most different team, man, I mean, every team is just so different, but I would say definitely the team with the biggest signings in the offseason was BC, obviously with Mike Riley. And of course, getting rid of Emmanuel Arsenault as well, that was a big deal, even though he didn't have the most stellar season last year. He was obviously still kind of a staple here in BC, and now looks like Brian Burnham is going to be their top slot receiver. We'll see how Deron Carter pans out as well. He's a very enigmatic figure in the CFL. And then they got the running back duo of John White and Brandon Rutley. Now, this seems like a bootleg of Jeremiah Johnson and Chris Rainey. Like, am I wrong?
No, it is exactly the same thing, except I believe John White's a little bit older. Really what this kind of looks like, this offense, is basically Edmonton's team before last year. John White, and then another secondary running back that would be really good, as well as Mike Riley, and a very solid receiving core. Like John said, Deron Carter being on the team, I think, is a big question mark in the sense that you never really know how Deron Carter's going to play. However, if anyone can get the best out of Deron Carter, it's Mike Riley. That is the same thing with Lamar Durant and Brian Burnham. That being said, Brian Burnham has produced despite having a horrible quarterback for the last 2 years, so it'll be really interesting to see how things go.
All right, may as well jump right into Edmonton, which replaced Mike Riley with Trevor Harris, and with him he brought Greg Ellingson. So that's obviously going to be the premier duo in Edmonton. Duke Williams went off to the NFL. He is on the Buffalo Bills now, so Ellingson will be the number 1 guy here. Kenny Stafford likely going to get more looks. Tavares Daniels came over from Calgary. I don't know if we can expect resurgence from him or whether we're going to see Kenny Stafford step up, but I think one thing with this team that's for sure is we probably should not expect a ton out of their running game.
No, the running game was hit and miss last year, with Gable having a few stellar performances kind of making up for his poor ones. But, he's a year older. As we've seen in the NFL, the running back position is so volatile. Players get hurt so quickly. It's almost like goaltenders in hockey. It's such a short half-life that I don't see Gable coming in and being better this year. He absolutely could be, but I don't see it. But their passing game as well, I don't think can come back better either. They have added Greg Ellingson, who is probably a top 5 receiver in the league. Tavares Daniels, when he's on his game, is a top 10, and you could even argue top 5. However, Trevor Harris is no Mike Riley, no matter how you put it. Not only is he not as good of a passer, he's not as good on his feet. He's not as good under pressure, and he will not be as good basically in any aspect of the game. You mix that with a kind of a poor running back situation, which means it opens up the field less for play action and other aspects of the game. It doesn't look super promising. Their defense really is going to have to hold it together. But the big issue is they weren't fantastic last year.
That's generous. I do think that their offensive line will give them a chance, at least more than Ottawa's did, because, man, that would, it's crazy. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but his passer rating when he has proper protection versus when he is getting rushed must be obviously you'd expect a difference, but that must be an insane difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the big thing with Trevor Harris. When he is well protected, he is an outstanding quarterback. The question is protection. And you're right, the Edmonton offensive line is better than the Red Blacks was last year. So that's a very fair point. It's a good point.
All right, let's move into the reigning Grey Cup champions who finally got over their hump. As you guys heard in the intro, we had to spice up the intro a little bit. No more Johnny Football.
John Football.
Oh, right.
He doesn't go by John anymore.
It's John Football now. I'm sorry. So not many changes in Calgary. Actually, everything looks like more or less the same here, which is why some foreshadowing here. I'm so confident in this offense. They're going to get Kamar Jordan back, Eric Rogers. They're going to have Breskison and Bagleton in the slot, who had the chance to develop with the injuries on the outside last year. They got Don Jackson back. They're going to have Morris probably returning the kicks. Give me a reason why this team doesn't repeat.
I'll give you a reason why they won't repeat, but I still think the team is good, and I think it would be in your best interest to bet that they're going to make the Western Conference Final. However, they have lost a few. They have lost a few things. As you said, they did lose Devaris Daniels, who is a very elite receiver. He didn't have a great year last year, but when he's on his game, he's elite. And as well, I feel like there's a chance Don Jackson, as one of these scat backs, may not come back as good as he was last year. These kind of running backs, the Stephon Logans, the Don Jacksons, they generally don't have a super long life on them in the sense that other teams figure them out. They figure out how they cut. They figure out where they run the ball. And he's not a John Cornish, or if you go far enough back, Joffrey Reynolds, where he's a true every down back. He's a very good running back. He's not every down. So I don't think the team is a for sure, but with Bo Levi Mitchell, who is obviously a top quarterback in the league, they're going to be good regardless.
Hot take. Muy caliente.
Yes, muy caliente indeed.
All right, let's move on to Ryderville here. Caleros making the comeback. They got Arsenault, Neiman Roosevelt. Can you see Cody Fajardo taking Caleros? Can you see Zach Caleros playing more than 12 games this season? There we go.
Wow, that's a really good question. I think that anyone who bets that Caleros is going to play more than 12 games is foolish, because I don't know if he's done that in the last several years. He's not, and it's not because he will play poorly, which he may, but that's not why. It's because he will get injured. I don't think there's any question that Caleros will get hurt. And to be honest, I watched Fajardo play a little bit in BC last year. I don't know if he's a starter yet. I don't know if he'll ever be a starter. He's a capable backup. He was okay in short yardage. But, I don't know how great this looks. And as well, the Riders obviously lost their head coach, the genius Christian Jones. And
yes.
the mad scientist. He's now with the Cleveland Browns, the up-and-comers. I think their offense really is going to take a step back this year, and I think adding Band-Aids like Emmanuel Arsenault doesn't really help that. The big secret here is that Neiman Roosevelt and Emmanuel Arsenault are basically the same player. At this point in their careers, they're pretty well the same thing. I think it would have made a whole lot more sense if they hadn't signed Arsenault and given someone like Justin McInnis, the 6'5" Canadian beast, potentially more playtime. That goes the same for Brock McCoy, Patrick Lebois, and even the German draft pick Max Zimmerman. I don't think adding age to an already slow aging receiving core makes a whole lot of sense. Though, the Riders generally turn out relatively well. I think Caleros, when he is healthy, is a suitable quarterback. I'm not going to go back and like I did last year and say he's elite, but he's definitely reasonable.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sorry, I was just pulling up his numbers, and he hasn't. He has played more than 12 games once since 2014, and he played 13 in 2014. Last year he played 14 games, but he threw 9 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. So,
oh Lord,
yeah, best of luck with that, Saskatchewan.
Yeah. I will say that if we're gonna give them any sort of props, I think they are relatively deep at running back. I believe Powell is still in the league despite some domestic. And they do have Thigpen, who is an excellent, not every down back, but third yard back, receiving option. He's very good. And I'm gonna stick to my guns with Trey Mason. Trey Mason has a lot of potential, and if he's given a solid opportunity, he can play well. But yeah, it's not a great team this year. At least their offense isn't fantastic, and they've lost their genius coach.
Very true, very true. I'm waiting for the day that you get off that Trey Mason train. Not just a lonely place to be right now.
I know, but he was so good in college.
Okay. I'm gonna stop there.
Yeah, keep going.
No. Oh yeah, no. We can jump into Winnipeg now. The two-headed monster that is the quarterback position in Winnipeg. God, you are amazing with the names here. Rob Streveler's narrative, Chris Streveler and Matt Nichols. I want to see.
Yeah.
I want more Chris Streveler. I don't know. I'm like, I want it.
Honestly, I think the third string quarterback I think could be starting on. Well, we haven't gone to the East yet, but you'll see. I feel like Chris Streveler and even their third string, I believe Bo Bennett, could also be playing starting quarterback in the CFL. They're both very good. This team's really interesting this year. They're an absolute wild card, and of course they have your favorite player in the world, Andrew Harris. Why don't you talk about the receiver position, John?
It's awkward because it's like, Darvin Adams was good last year, but these guys Dembski was kind of used in he was used in a really weird way last year, especially at the beginning of the season where they were just trying to get him at the end zone. Tompkins, another failed NFL story. He was on the Patriots for a bit. They have Drew Wolotarski back in the slot. You want to have that. What's the narrative he has with Streveler? They were roommates. That was it.
Yes.
The roommate narrative. So I don't know. You don't have a ton to talk about here. I mean, is Rashawn going to take the next step? Is he ready?
This is my hot take of the day. Rashad Salmonize is most definitely going to take a step this year. He was solid last year. John and I have talked about this a solid amount simply because Rashad actually went to the same high school we did. And so we've kind of been watching him potentially a little bit closer. What's really interesting about Rashad is that he is very fast, has very solid size, potentially close to NFL size. However, his route running is just not where it's supposed to be. If he can come in with solid route running, I think there's a really good chance that he picks up very solid yardage. It is in Winnipeg's best interest for a Canadian wide receiver like Rashad to actually put up.
You had it right that time. But
it was Rashawn. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. But yeah, it's in Winnipeg's best interest to have him turn out. You want as many productive Canadians as possible. So I think they're going to give him every opportunity because he does have a lot of raw skills. It's just kind of the more technical aspects of his game that need a little bit of work.
Yeah, he is very fast. He was on my 4x100 track team, actually. I got to run with him. He was fast.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, he was fast.
Yeah,
he was a lot faster than me. He was definitely what do they call it? The anchor or whatever. You always have your fastest guy run last.
Yeah.
All right, what are we about 20 minutes in? Yeah, we can break this up into 2 20-minute shows. Why not? I mean, we still have to talk about our predictions too, of course, of
yes,
where we think each team will finish. So Rob West, adopted child of Kanye West, how do you think the Western Conference is going to shake out this season?
So it's really interesting because I think BC and the Stamps are very close. However, the big key here is going to be execution. I don't know if we mentioned this before, but the Lions obviously moved past the Wally Buono era at the same time they signed Mike Riley and all these things. And they've brought in Devon Claybrooks, who is a very young, progressive coach who wants their players to be themselves. I've listened to him interviewed several times, and I got to say, I love this dude. But the real question is, will it turn out on the field? But I trust him more so because I like him than anything, and he's been successful everywhere he's gone. And Jarius Jackson is obviously a really good offensive coordinator, so I do have BC in first in the West. However, I'm not solid on that. Like, it wouldn't shock me if my number 2 on the boards, the Stampeders, would kind of move forward. So put BC and the Stampeders kind of 1A, 1B, but obviously it's going to be very close. At number 3, I have Winnipeg, because I think that having a player like Andrew Harris is going to steal you games. Matt Nichols is a reasonable quarterback, and I think they have the strongest receiving core in the West outside of Edmonton. However, they have, I would say, probably a better quarterback at this point in time. Though I wouldn't have said that that Trevor Harris is worse than Nichols last year, but I think in his recent line of work, we've seen that. At number 4, I have the Eskimos. More than anything because I don't really trust Trevor Harris. I also don't trust their running game, as previously mentioned. I think Ellingson and Devarius Daniels are going to be useful additions. However, I just don't see them carrying a team that was not good defensively last year, with a quarterback that is, quite frankly, inconsistent. And in the 5th and final spot, I have Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan, I don't think, has a whole lot going for it. They have okay running back depth, but this is a team that desperately needs a rebuild. The time of Rider pride has kind of passed. Unless someone like Max Zimmerman or Justin McInnes can really take off, at the very least from a fantasy perspective, this is a team you're going to fade almost every week. There's just not a whole lot there.
For sure. All right, going into my rankings here, I have Calgary at number 1. I mean, I just think the consistency and fluidity of that team, just kind of maintaining basically everybody relevant, will keep them in first. I think BC will finish second, though. There's definitely going to be a bounce back with Mike Riley playing in a much bigger market as well. I think that'll affect him. It'll affect Deron Carter, hopefully positively, and
I hope so.
Drive them in the right direction. Winnipeg is going to be third because, again, I think that is a solid team with the 2 quarterback options, so you're not kind of scrambling if one of them gets hurt. Like, if anything, I'm not saying that anybody's hoping one of them gets hurt, but, like, at least it makes the decision easier if one does, because, if Nichols starts playing poorly, the heat's immediately just on O'Shea to be like, where's Chris Strevler? You have a perfectly capable quarterback. Why isn't he playing if the starter's playing bad? So I don't know. That really puts some heat on him. 4th, I have different from you. I have Saskatchewan. I just think, again, this team hasn't been offensively relevant since Darian Durant was in his prime. And they found a way to get it done on defense and special teams. And I think they'll do that again here, and they won't be the basement of the Western Conference, which I do think will be Edmonton, because without the firepower of Mike Riley, I just don't think they'll be able to keep up with those teams, because he was the reason they were able to keep up. It sure as hell was not because of their defense.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's a really good point with Saskatchewan, that last year they were able to kind of ride off their defense and special teams. So that's a very good point. However, it doesn't change my mind.
All right, you want to do Grey Cup predictions then?
Yeah, sure.
All right, because we're both picking teams in the Western Conference. I have Calgary winning it again. I have them repeating, 100 times over. Not 100 times over, but I take that bet 10 times out of 10.
Despite the fact that I don't have the Stamps being ahead of BC in the standings for the season, I actually do see the Stamps winning the Grey Cup this year. It's a much more experienced team. I would say they're more stout defensively than BC, especially with BC losing Solomon Elamimian. There's a lot of newcomers on the Lions defense, and I just think the Stamps do have that consistency, despite the fact that I don't think they have the same offensive firepower as BC does this year.
Damn it! I thought you were going to say BC. I really wanted to.
No.
I wanted to make you put some money there.
No.
Okay.
I'll be putting money on BC, but that goes against my brain. For sure.
All right. I think that is a good place to wrap this up. We'll call this the Western Conference episode. We'll do the Eastern Conference next week, and then the week after that, we'll be jumping into DFS. Guys, the podcast is not going to be up yet on iTunes, Stitcher, and all those other platforms. I believe it'll only be SoundCloud for the first couple episodes until we can get it up on those other platforms. But if you could support it somehow, if you do have a SoundCloud account, or if you want to preemptively start keeping an eye out for it on iTunes, we would really, really appreciate that. Talk to you guys next week. Until then, take care.
Have a good one.